Well, the NFL has a lot of problems, but at least they're suspending players for gambling. We got all that and a whole lot more on today's episode of Locked On NFL.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome into another episode of Locked On NFL, your daily podcast, breaking down all the biggest stories from around the National Football League here as a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Don't forget, you could always subscribe and follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, we thank you very much for making us your first listen of the day every day. And today's episode, it's a Tuesday, so you've got Luke Braun at Luke Braun NFL on Twitter, myself, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, your resident Locked On NFL experts who are nerds around numbers and all the other good things as well. We're going to get to our yikes and likes for the week, as we do every single week. Luke's going to update us on what's going on and what happened with the Minnesota Vikings and Dalvin Cook, but Luke, I mentioned that we're nerds about numbers, but the NFL loves number nerds as long as you're not doing it in such a way that it has to do with gambling. We're here we are again. The Indianapolis Colts apparently under investigation, and a Colts player in particular, currently unnamed, but they say that not a star, but somebody that the quote average fan would know, may be in a little bit of trouble. And now we're seeing more
Get
and
your
more.
Sherlock Holmes pipe out.
Right. Yeah. Now we can start to deduce. So we're here to speculate about who it is. No, I'm just joking. We're not going to do that. But Luke, like, this is such an interesting thing because I smell nothing but hypocrisy when it comes to these like gambling suspensions from the NFL. But before I rail against the NFL, which I am so apt to do, let's maybe be a little bit more judicious about this.
Yeah, look, it was a Rappaport tweet. In that tweet, it mentioned, betting on several games, betting on Colts games. Obviously, there is this huge impropriety, this conflict of interest issue. If you have a wager, if you're a Colt and you have a wager on a Colts game, if you have, even if it's like an over-under bet, right? You may do something like you think about a decision where maybe a player should go out of bounds or should slide down in bounds versus scoring. But what if they have there's a conflict of it, and you just don't want to mess with any of that. And I think even at a greater level, like NFL players betting on the NFL exposes the league to a conflict of interest, I think, in a way. Like if you play for the Buccaneers, but you have a great friend on the Eagles, let's say, but there's a former Buccaneer that signed with the Eagles and now that's your good friend and you talk to him all the time and they've got an ankle injury and that ankle injury moves the spread, but you know that they're going to play and the betting market doesn't, and you bet on that game. Like there's a little bit of an insider trading issue. So I get cracking down on gambling from the NFL's perspective. Now, stack it up against other problems that the NFL has with their personal conduct policy. It's obviously going to look pretty bad, but I don't think changing the way they approach gambling is the solution to that. Like they should just solve the problems that exist themselves. But I definitely get why, especially because it sounds like there's been a lot of gambling.
Yeah. That's the thing. Like this can't be new. We've seen this now. Of course, Calvin Ridley was the big first kind of moonshot example that everybody saw. Then we saw the Detroit Lions situation, Jameson Williams and others. Jameson Williams suspended for gambling on not on the NFL, but gambling, placing bets while at the team facility, at an NFL facility.
Right.
And then others that were suspended for effectively a year because they were betting on the NFL. And I think that my sort of apprehension around all of this comes from the fact that you watch any of the NFL's events and there's betting odds. It's brought to you by this betting company, that betting company. They're putting sports books inside of the stadiums where the games are played and all these other things. But how dare you bet as an NFL player? Like, it just feels so hypocritical to me. And what I'm saying here, by the way, is not that you should just allow NFL players to just willy-nilly bet on the NFL. I think they should willy-nilly be able to bet on whatever they wanted outside of the NFL. And I do think too that to an extent betting on the NFL, but betting not for or against the team that you play for is possible. But I think that what the NFL should do is just create so much red tape that it discourages players from doing it, but still makes it legal and gives them an opportunity to do it. I.e., if you bet, you have to do it through this thing or that thing, whatever it might be, or you have to submit what these bets are, because it's clear that no matter what, if you're doing it, you're going to be found out. You're logging on to the facility's Wi-Fi, you're placing bets, whatever, like all these other things.
IT can see what you do.
Exactly. And so
we can all see what you're Googling, Dave.
Right. So so let me at least give you the opportunity to report it and say, here's what I bet on. Here's what I did. Here's why, you know what I mean? But I'm not betting on my team. I know I'm not allowed to do that. I'm betting on the Jets to beat the Green Bay Packers or whatever. That was kind of just for you there, Luke. It's
which they did.
Yes, right. And so, like, I think, but like, make it to where they have to report it, things like that, which might deter people from doing it in the first place. They might feel like, okay, well, that's just too much trouble. I'm not going to do it. Or at least it provides an avenue where you can do that. These people can be human beings and do something that they enjoy with a game that they know. And then it keeps you from having to spoil your product in this type of a situation. And to your point about like the insider trading part of it is that, like, look, if I'm an NFL player, if I'm a Buccaneer and I have a former Buccaneers player that's a Philadelphia Eagle, and I know that that player is not going to play and I want to bet, I'm calling up my cousin. Like, I have my cousin who I can call and I can say, hey, put this amount on this team because this dude is not
Get a
playing.
fall guy.
I'm doing it. I'm 100% going to do it. Come for me, NFL. I don't care. And so, like, it's, and I'm not one of these people that's like, well, if you can't stop all, bad things, then don't stop any of it. I just mean regulate it a little bit so that it creates a deterrent and also holds people accountable should they decide to partake. That's all.
Right. It can be productive to make there be an extra step to go through.
100%.
If that step is calling your cousin or whatever, like that can help the whole thing. And I think we should be abundantly clear here. The NFL does not have a moral issue with gambling. I don't think anybody has a moral issue with gambling.
No.
Unless their name is Jebediah and they live in Rhode Island circa 1649. Like, I don't think I don't think that there's a moral issue with gambling anymore. The problem is with conflict of interest.
Yes.
And with the great nightmare scenario is like point shaving and stuff like that. But I think even more minor versions of that is what the NFL is afraid of. And I fully understand the desire to say, all right, you can go bet on a baseball game and players are allowed to gamble. That's the other thing. It's like, you may gamble under the right circumstances. Sure. Okay, fine. And there was an article in The Athletic about it with some anonymous NFL players talking about it. And a lot of the sentiment was about, like, we just want to be clear on the policy and the process, because a lot of the guys in the article were like, oh, I thought you just like weren't allowed to gamble at all, which is not the policy. That's not true. So like they might not even know the policy. This is what happened, I think, with Jameson Williams. This is what happened with like a lot of those Lions. I'm sure something like this happened with the Colts too, where never apply what is it, never attribute to malice, which you could always attribute to ignorance or whatever. They maybe just didn't know. And if they know better, then they do that. But I think when you as a league decide that you're going to go from, we never, ever talk or even acknowledge gambling, and you have Al Michaels saying some people care about this extra point, and that's like as much as you get in a Sunday Night Football game, to no, we're going to be sponsored by it. We're putting the over-unders in the score, in the Chiron. We're doing everything. You're just going to get this. This feels like growing pains to me. This feels natural. This feels like you're just going to get, all right, we totally changed our policy and a few people are going to mess it up. And those are just the unfortunate few that like got recognized. Yeah.
It'll stink for them in like 2-3 years where the approach to gambling for players is entirely different. But you're right. Like, this is a part of kind of what you have to go through in order to get to that point. So we'll see. Coming up next, Luke has all the knowledge and knows everything that needs to be known about the Dalvin Cook situation in
every
Minnesota,
single thing,
every single bit of it. So I'm going to ask him all the questions that he's expecting and a few questions that he's not expecting, so that we get the nitty gritty of all of it. And we'll start with what did Dalvin Cook have for breakfast the day that he was released? I'm just kidding. We don't have to do that, but we're going to get to all that as we continue on with today's episode of
NFL players need to turn the show off now. Okay,
this is the time. This is
NFL players leave. Take earmuffs. All right. Take your fast forward, because we got to talk to you about America's #1 sports book, a place where everybody except for NFL players should go and place a wager on some NFL games. You can bet on NFL stuff right now, like future win totals. You can even bet exact win totals, which is a very fun one. You get like plus 400 for, the Saints to win 10 games exactly, right? Or you can always do their over under or whatever you think you can do. You can also, of course, you got the NBA finals, NHL finals going on. You can bet on 3-point shooters, point total over unders, goal scorers, all kinds of stuff, parlay a bunch together, do whatever you want. And if you go to FanDuel.com/locked on and you haven't gambled before, like, an NFL player, but not an NFL player, but, like a good, maybe a former NFL player, you've been in the NFL, you of course haven't gambled before, but now you want to go to FanDuel.com/locked on, and you can get a no sweat first bet up to $2,500 in bonus bets back. That number's been juiced up. That's $2,500 in bonus bets back if you whiff on your first bet. The FanDuel app is safe, secure, and very easy to use, and it pays out instantly when you win. So go to FanDuel.com/locked on. Get that no sweat first bet up to $2,500 in bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't cash. And go ahead and do some stuff that NFL players can't do. That is FanDuel.com/locked on. Make every moment more.
All right, everybody, continue on with today's episode of Locked On NFL. I have like a teacher discipline about me the entire time that Luke is doing that FanDuel pitch.
You got to watch Locked On NFL on YouTube.
I'm just coming through with the finger pointing, getting finger wags. I'm
very powerful.
That's the noise that I think of every time that I do that is, ooh, you're in trouble. We appreciate you making this appreciate you making this your first listen of the day, every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Luke. So we've got now Dalvin Cook, who is, the news broke a little while ago that he was set to be released by the Minnesota Vikings. He is now a free agent. And this seems like this is one of those moves that could be a bit of a surprise to maybe like the casual NFL fan that loves the game, but isn't necessarily a Minnesota Vikings fan, and who just looks at Dalvin Cook, the name of Dalvin Cook, and goes, oh, that's a really, really good running back. And then all of a sudden, that player ends up being released. So let's do this first. Can you set the table for us around what it is that led to Dalvin Cook being released by the Minnesota Vikings? And then we can go further from there.
So if untouched, his contract would run the Vikings $14 million against the cap, which is untenable. That's really a running back contract. And it's a running back contract. Yeah. So that's untenable. The Vikings have no interest in doing that. We're either going to reduce that number if Dalvin Cook agrees to it, which he has not really felt, and maybe until recently, that there's really a reason to do that, because he thought his market would be able to get at least most of that back if released. So it's, hey, trade me or cut me. I'm not taking your pay cut, which is fair. That's where it all has been. So trade negotiations have been going on all offseason. They got really, really close with Miami in March, but then it fell through, and then Miami picked a running back in the third round. So that's been a much different negotiating environment, but it's not dead. It's different. And Dalvin Cook has put out through all avenues, through his agent. He's told his personal trainer, who's gone on a podcast and said this. He's leaked it through. He wants to play in Miami. He loves Miami. He's from Miami. He is Dolphins through and through. That would be his preferred destination, and that has all been very clear. So that's not out of it. There's also somebody, I think it's Jeremy Fowler on ESPN, said, I think he said it on SportsCenter or something like that, that there are two AFC East teams. So that could be the Bills, although the Bills have a running back room, and that includes James Cook, Dalvin's brother. Right. So there's a connection there, but they also, I think they have like Damian Harris. And it could be the Patriots, who have Ramondre Stevenson and then kind of a bunch of guys. Yeah. So that could be it. So there's been a lot of reports that there are multiple trade suitors. So right now the Vikings are, and the idea of Dalvin Cook staying, no door left closed, like don't close any doors behind you, but that kind of seems like both parties understand that that's probably not how this will play out. He'll either be traded or released. So the Vikings are saying, hey, we've got a lot of suitors, come give us a trade offer, and it's fine for us to wait. We don't need that cap space right now. Yeah. We actually made our cap space elsewise. This is inefficient. We want to get rid of it, but we don't need the space. So they're basically kind of sitting on it and waiting for people to come to them. But then the other, like all of the teams that are potential suitors are going, well, why would we trade for him? Because we kind of know you're going to release him if nobody does. So they're all kind of standing firm and saying, we'll just do this in free agency.
Right.
Either way, Dalvin Cook, if he does get traded, he'll renegotiate a new deal with that team. So there is also that aspect to it of Dalvin Cook and his agent and his camp trying to hype up Dalvin Cook. So you may have seen a lot of reports about, hey, he got a shoulder surgery that's going to help a lot with his injury issues. And he's been posting his own highlights on Twitter and stuff as this way to kind of drum up his own value, because he is in an active contract negotiation. He might be in active contract negotiations with several teams. And he's trying to get the most value out of that. So everybody is sort of staring at each other. It's a little bit of like a Wild West Clint Eastwood standoff. And everybody's kind of staring at each other, but eventually something will give. I wonder if it gets all the way into camp. And, you know, maybe the Patriots get into camp and they look at their running back room and they're like, man, we don't like these guys. Let's go make the move. And then they get Dalvin Cook.
Yeah, and genuinely, I think that's best for Dalvin Cook anyway, especially as a running back. I've been saying this about Alvin Kamara with New Orleans as well, is like, some people have been a little bit frustrated that he hasn't been at OTAs, which is actually a story pretty much since 2019. He hasn't been at OTAs, but the idea of attending something like signing on with a new team during the voluntary OTA period and then not showing up with that new team can sometimes that's not the greatest look. Like if you're going to a new team, OTAs actually are a little bit beneficial. But waiting to join a new team until after OTAs, until after the mandatory minicamp as well, especially as a running back, just kind of curbs your injury chance for the offseason, which is really, really nice and really, really helpful. And then you get into training camp where you're doing things at more of a natural, comfortable pace, or you're not risking yourself as much.
And you get lots of time with the playbook anyways, so you'll be able to catch up and you'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And with a lot of these teams
who have been in the league, like, come on.
Like going from the Vikings to the Dolphins, for example, would not be that much of a switch schematically. I mean, like Kevin O'Connell plays it a lot differently, pushes a lot of different levers than like what Mike McDaniel does. But in terms of learning it, they all use the same lingo. They use the same sort of general framework and structure. And it's just a matter of Mike McDaniel chooses different plays on the day. And you know, uses different personnel packages and stuff, but that would be a fairly easy transition. So if you're a Dolphins fan and you're wondering if Dalvin Cook really needs to get here for OTAs, I would say that that's probably not something you need to be too worried about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, the Minnesota Vikings not restructuring his deal still makes sense, right? Because you can restructure the deal technically without the player saying yes or no. It doesn't matter.
But it would make him harder to trade because
it
would turn a bunch of salary into non-transferable money in the form of a signing bonus. So you would essentially just remove the amount. And it's also beneficial for the Vikings to trade him versus cutting him, because Dalvin Cook has a little bit of guaranteed salary that would then travel in the purpose of a trade. If he got cut and then let's say he asks for way too much money and he doesn't get signed, that guaranteed money turns into dead cap. I believe there's like some offset language or something that could maybe get rid of that, but you're kind of taking a risk. So yeah, not only that, but you want to get it. Now, in terms of what you're not getting a 3rd round pick for this. You're not getting a 4th round pick for this. This is going to be a 6th for a 7th in 2025 kind of stuff, because really the purpose of trading Dalvin Cook away is dumping the money.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And especially at this point, we see all the time this late in off seasons that draft capital is usually a lot lower than we expect in trades for veteran players. Then you add on the running back portion of all this conversation and it falls even further. All right, real quick, last thing for you on the Dalvin Cook situation. What does this mean for the Minnesota Vikings backfield?
Yeah, so the way we've been looking at it, I mean, we have sort of been operating under the assumption that Dalvin Cook is not there. They've done all OTAs without Dalvin Cook. He, of course, has not shown up. So it's been Alexander Mattison. I would say he's the first team running back, but it won't be as dominant a share. He'll be a 3-down back, but he won't be. I mean, Dalvin Cook got 95% of snaps. Alexander Mattison would get like 1 series a game just to spell him. And it would be, it was Dalvin Cook. It'd be like Derrick Henry in Tennessee would like, he's the guy. Madison's probably going to be more like a 65-ish, maybe 50 even % snap share. And it'll be also susceptible to competition. There's a bunch of young guys. If you're a dynasty player, you want to take a swing. Bunch of young guys. Ty Chandler, the Vikings are really high on. Kene Nwangwu, he'll make the team on kick returns, and so that always gets you. You'll be dressed every day. That gives you a chance if you're looking for somebody to pop in with. They drafted in the 7th round Dwayne McBride. There's a wild card for you. Somebody's gonna totally show out in the preseason and become RB2 out of that group. And then that guy might be worth a fantasy stash if that's the most of the people want to know what's the fantasy kind of pecking order.
Yep.
But it's Mattison is the only person that's like worth putting on a fantasy roster right now. The rest of them is you're hoping someone breaks out.
Makes perfect sense. So that's the down low on what's going on with Dalvin Cook. Of course, we'll keep you up to date here on Locked On NFL with whatever happens there. But of course, you could always find more from Luke over at Locked On Vikings as well if you're wanting to follow this story on sort of an up-to-the-minute basis. Coming up next, Luke and I are going to go through our yike and our like for the week. And I think there's this weird situation going down in Pittsburgh that we're probably going to be talking about for a while. We got that coming up.
To address it as a network, we have to address.
Yes. We have so much we have to discuss here. We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On NFL, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, everybody, continuing on and wrapping up today's episode of Locked On NFL with the Tuesday tradition, the greatest of all Tuesday traditions. There aren't a lot of Tuesday traditions out there. This is the only Tuesday tradition.
The only thing people do regularly on Tuesdays.
Yeah.
Apologies to your poker nights.
Apologies. Yeah, your poker nights are dumb anyway. Yike and like, this is what we do every single Tuesday. We come up with one thing that we love, one thing that we despise from the week beforehand, and go over all of it. Should we just jump into the through line for a moment?
No, let's do our likes first.
Do the likes first. All right.
Let's do some positivity, and then we'll wrap up with some of the yike-a-ronies.
All right, so let's start off with our likes. Why don't you kick us off?
Sure. So John Lynch went on SiriusXM, our partner, SiriusXM,
partner here,
and said that they felt really good about Brock Purdy as the, I think, leader in the clubhouse for the starting job in San Francisco was the phrase that he used. That's crazy. I mean, that's hilarious. That QB situation in San Francisco is fascinating.
How wild.
But what that implies is that there's like a decent chance that Brock Purdy is actually back in time for a little bit of training camp. That's probably wouldn't play in the preseason or anything, but like it feels like after that Tommy John surgery and all that stuff, that rehab process is a very notorious one. I mean, for baseball players, it takes them out for an entire calendar year. So for Brock Purdy to suffer that in the NFC Championship in late January and be back in time to maybe even get a week of practice in before week 1 and be the leader in the clubhouse for the job, that implies a very good result in terms of Brock Purdy's rehab and his health. And we love it when players can defeat and overcome that kind of injury and overcome the odds of being Mr. Irrelevant up against 3rd overall pick in a QB competition and be the leader in the clubhouse in it, even though he's not going to play for most of the preseason. So he's not going to be competing. He still might win that job. That would be the coolest thing in the world. Go Brock Purdy. He rules.
Yeah, that would be pretty dope. I was trying to look and see real quick, but I think he's going with the same. I believe it's Dr. James Anderson that he is doing this procedure with. James Andrews, not Anderson. Thank you. No wonder why I couldn't find the confirmation. The famous Dr. James
known
Andrews.
For fixing Adrian Peterson's ACL before he went off for 2,000 yards.
Yep. And
known for allegedly botching Sharif Floyd's surgery and settling to a huge thing of it. You win some, you lose some.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, you get yikes and you get likes. Drew Brees a few years ago had a UCL injury, which was effectively a Tommy John surgery. Went to Dr. James Andrews, got that surgery. I believe the injury took place, it was against the Rams. I want to say it was like the 2nd week of that season. And then he was out and was gone only 5 games.
That was the year Teddy Bridgewater came in and went 5-0, right?
That's exactly right. That's exactly where I was going with this. I was about to say, you think that this is a Brock Purdy tweet. This is actually a Teddy Bridgewater tweet because Teddy Bridgewater went 5-0 during that time. No, but
free agent Teddy Bridgewater, who we will never quit.
We will never quit. But the right person to choose, I guess, to go for that surgery. And we have seen a quick turnaround from a surgery similar to this. Obviously, every surgery is different. Everyone takes the surgeries differently, everything like that. But what I will say is that Drew Brees coming back from that injury, coming back from that surgery that year so quickly that his arm was not what it needed to be toward the end of that same season. And I think understandably so. So I will be very interested to see Brock Purdy being the leader in the clubhouse, coming back from that injury quick enough to be out there on the field week 1 would be awesome. But can he last 17 games on that arm? That's going to be really, really interesting to see. But
for sure.
Either way.
And we'll
cool.
see how that affects a guy whose play style isn't really based on arm talent to begin with.
True. Yeah. Yeah, very, very true. All right, my like for the week, I'm going to keep this one close to home because I think that this is really neat. And I'm going to go with Cameron Jordan, the New Orleans Saints defensive end. It's not very often that you hear a general manager for your favorite football team go on to radio, which this was also with our partners over at SiriusXM, by the way, breaking all the stories. But he comes on and goes to visit SiriusXM's NFL show, or one of SiriusXM's NFL show, and mentions that he very much intends, Mickey Loomis, the New Orleans Saints general manager, to make sure that Cam Jordan finishes his career in the city of New Orleans as a New Orleans Saint. Basically says that Cam Jordan will be a New Orleans Saint as long as he wants to be a New Orleans Saint. Cameron Jordan has said over and over again that he's going to be a New Orleans Saint for as long as the Saints want him to be there. And that one of his biggest goals outside of getting the franchise sack record, which he now has, was to do just like his father, who you're very familiar with, Luke, who was a career Minnesota Viking, Steve Jordan, the tight end. He wanted to be a lifer, and it looks like that is on the way and that they're prioritizing getting that contract done. And basically you got a public commitment from the general manager saying, yeah, he's finishing his career here in New Orleans. Super cool. Big like.
This bums me out a little bit as a Vikings fan because I have for years and years and years and years dreamt. Same thing with Larry Fitzgerald. I dreamt of the old washed up year. I don't even need to make, you don't even need to make the team. You can retire after August. Just give me one training camp where we can get that picture of Steve Jordan and then his son in a preseason Vikings jersey. Give me that great picture at US Bank Stadium. And then that's it. And then you can retire and you can say you never played a real game with another team. That's all I've ever just give me the sentimental retirement tour. Cameron Jordan, old, washed, not even good anymore. I don't need any valuable production.
Right.
You don't need to give me anything that you actually want to give to the Saints. Just give me that one picture with his dad. That's all I want.
What is the one like spent training camp, like legendary player spends training camp with Minnesota Vikings, and it's weird to see him in a Minnesota Vikings jersey player? Because I can give you the Saints one.
Oh, I can give you a former Saint.
Okay.
It wasn't training camp. He actually was with the team for a couple of years, but there was a very weird Archie Manning.
That's a great
saga.
One. That's a really good one.
I mean, Brett Favre is the real one. And that's like, what?
Yeah,
was
yeah.
that?
That's always
that was
the weird.
Surreal.
Like, what are you
People
doing?
Still aren't over that.
My favorite one is Champ Bailey spent a training camp with the New Orleans Saints.
Very nice.
And so there's photos of Champ Bailey in a black and gold 27 at training camp. And of course, like, you know, it
the
never
weirdest
went anywhere, but
training camp guy we ever had, and he didn't make the team, was Brock Lesnar in 2004.
Oh, that's so good.
It's the weirdest one.
That is so good. That's like
if you look up
like
Brock Lesnar
Bill
Vikings,
Goldberg in a
it's
Falcons
so
jersey.
Funny. He's young. His 2004. This is 20 years ago.
Right.
He's like in his camp jersey, like doing drills, and he's Brock Lesnar. Like,
that's so good. That's so good. If you have a favorite player, or if you have a favorite team who barely employed a player, and it's just like this little like
your favorite cup of coffee.
Yeah, it's just like this little like footnote in that player's history. Please tell us who it is. All right, let's quickly wrap up with our yikes here. My yike is that the 60-year-old man named Christopher Carter, who stole Kenny Pickett, Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback's car, didn't show up for court and now has a bench warrant against him. And I know a lot about football. I also unfortunately know a lot about the legal process. I grew up in the hood. You cover
the Saints.
And that's terrible. I cover the NFL.
I saw a tweet from you, I think it was today or yesterday, that was like, well, this person's court date is today, and then the next one is tomorrow. It's like,
yeah, it's Marcus May. Marcus May, New Orleans Saints safety. His next court date is July 25th, which is 6 days before Alvin Kamara's, whose is July 31st. So it's just like one then the other. It's going to be a very, very fun training camp down here in New Orleans. But yeah, just big yike, that whole situation of like, first of all, Kenny, you can't be getting your car jacked by a 60-year-old. I don't care. Like this can't be happening. Secondly, you can't be 60-year-old jacking cars. And thirdly, if you're 60, like just face the music, fam. You live enough to know what happens. Like, you know what I mean? Like you've experienced enough to know like, oh, I'm not going to get away with this.
You think he's worried he's going to get like 20 years and then that's it?
Yeah, so
like, whatever. I'm just gonna go like live in Bulgaria now.
Yeah, maybe. I hope that if he fled, he like fled. I'm talking Cuba, like seek exile, like him and Tupac chilling on the beach somewhere. Like that's what I hope is happening. Because otherwise, this is just delaying the inevitable and perhaps making it even worse on yourself.
Well, that brings me to my yike, which is it's to Christopher Carter, our own Christopher Carter of Locked On Steelers. We know it was you.
It was you.
You don't have to lie to us, man.
It's fine.
He's tweeting like, "Oh, they came looking for me." It was Chris. We know it was you. You did it. You're
lying 60, here, boy.
You're in Pittsburgh. You match the description.
Spitting image.
Your spitting image. Face the music. We know you stole Kenny Pickett's car, Christopher. Give it back.
Yeah. Yeah. The thing that I love, though, is that Chris is fleeing the law and still producing episodes of Locked On NFL and Locked On Steelers. Yeah. Let's just give him an applause.
Dedication. I'll give him the dedication. Continuing to produce Steelers coverage and content every day.
Every single day.
From the run. From on the run.
From on the run, yes.
From various undisclosed locations and bunkers with from untraceable VPNs and Wi-Fi signals.
Gotta love it.
It's fantastic.
Gotta love it. And probably still betting on FanDuel too.
Yeah,
probably still doing what
he's not an NFL player. That's a different Chris Carter. So we're good.
Yeah, it was just an NFL car. That's okay. Not a big deal. Not a big deal.
He's gonna get Kenny Pickett in trouble for gambling from his Wi-Fi hotspot from his car.
From his car. I love it. Oh, good. I was thinking that this episode wasn't unhinged enough. I'm glad that we finished in an unhinged.
I'm glad we went completely off the rails.
Just in time. Just in time. We appreciate y'all, as always, for tuning in for another episode of Locked On NFL and for spending time with Luke Braun and Ross Jackson here on these Tuesday episodes. Make sure you come back tomorrow. James Rapine, as well as Tony Wiggins, taking you into all the biggest stories around the NFL. And, of course, just as much fun as we are, though not quite as fun as Luke and I are. If you want to make sure you're catching everything around your favorite NFL team, NBA team with the NBA Finals, the offseason on the way, whatever sport you love, we got you covered here on the Locked On Podcast Network. So make sure you go and check that out. And here we are. We appreciate you very much for making us a part of your day, part of your routine here on Locked On NFL, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.